Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again, it is Sunday, and that means it's time for the Texas Gun Vault Poll Question of the Week, a weekly vlog where I ask you as my viewers and subscribers about something that deals with guns, gun culture, or even current events that I want to get your thoughts and opinions on. This week's topic, I think, is something really serious and addresses the core issue of the Second Amendment, our right to keep and bear arms to fight tyranny, both foreign and domestic. And this is because what's going on in Ukraine and the Russian invasion of that country. So as I said, right now the news media and the news cycle is going on and on about the Russian invasion in Ukraine. One of the hardest things I think for most Americans to digest about this war is that the Russians fight wars like wars are supposed to be fought. And that is, they're there to kill people and destroy things, whether that's for good or for evil. It seems like when America fights wars, we have journalists embedded everywhere and we can see everything that's going on. So much of the wars that we fight are very transparent. But most countries around the world don't operate that way. So a lot of the information we're getting from Ukraine or from Russia, who knows if it's correct? A lot of it's probably propaganda. But one of the stories that made a lot of headlines in the past couple of weeks is that the Ukrainian government is handing out fully automatic AK-47s to all able-bodied people to help them fight the Russians. Now, this is probably because they know that the only way to beat the Russians is going to be an insurgency, essentially a guerrilla warfare. So they're handing out these weapons. But a lot of people here, especially in the United States, are looking at this and going, man, it's too little, too late. They don't have a right to keep and bear arms, their citizens are not allowed to own guns, and then stuff like this happens. I tell people a lot, the world is full of evil people that are going to do evil things. And we all hope and pray that the day never comes that we have to fight back. But if we look at the history of human civilization, that day will come. It might not come in our lifetime or our children's lifetime, but that day will come. And it's very short-sighted of anybody to think, well, we live in a certain century, the 21st century. We don't have to worry about such things. Well, we do. Because trust me, while we live in relative peace here in the United States and we're surrounded by two oceans on both of our sides and we're very far away from many of these global conflicts, one day, maybe 50 years, maybe 100 years, these battles may come to our shore. And having a well-armed populace that understands how to use guns responsibly and effectively is a huge deterrent from the United States ever being invaded. Now, people will say our military is so powerful and so vast, we don't need guns as civilians because they'll be there to save us. The government and the military will save us. Well, not necessarily so. After all, the Ukrainians, they have a government and they're not doing very much at defending them. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, Russia's a bigger threat. Yeah, but the Ukrainians could have been preparing for this a long time ago, and they chose not to. They always thought, it can't happen to us. We're going to win this through diplomacy. And as much as I want diplomacy to work, it doesn't always. So now they're having to hand out these guns to civilians. And what's the odds these guns are actually going to be returned? And how many of these civilians actually know how to operate these guns? Well, these are a lot of questions that are getting lost in the fog of war. But that's kind of the pretext to this week's question. So with all of that said, let's dive in to this week's poll. This last week we saw the news that Russia has invaded Ukraine, and in response to this move, the Ukrainian government has been issuing and giving citizens fully automatic weapons to defend the nation. These civilians are untrained and many have never fired a gun before due to the fact their nation does not have a right to keep and bear arms. I made a video on this channel about the hypocrisy of anti-gun politicians and how they are applauding this giveaway of weapons while claiming that there is absolutely no need for an American to own an AR-15. And then I referenced the video that I was speaking of. Do you feel this story will wake up any people who may have anti-gun tendencies to the reality of the world we live in and possibly get them to rethink their position on the Second Amendment? So obviously the question I pose is, with all of this information coming out from Ukraine and everything that we're seeing possibly being filtered through the fog of war, Does this change the mind of any American that might be anti-gun or apathetic to the Second Amendment? People that say it can never happen here, we don't need weapons, we don't need these weapons or weapons of war or however you want to categorize them because it can't happen here, and seeing what's happening to the unarmed innocent civilians in the Ukraine. And because other nations are not coming to their defense, whether you think they should or not, they're kind of on their own. And you have untrained civilians going up against the Russian military. There are some reports saying they're actually being quite effective because a major military going up against guerrilla fighters, it's asymmetrical warfare. And that type of battles can sometimes not be determined by technology and might alone. Because after all, the Ukrainians have something to fight for, and they're fighting the war asymmetrically, which gives them the tactical advantage, which I think applies to any type of invasion that may happen in the long-off future here in the United States. So that's where this question is coming from, and I'm curious because I'm already seeing both people saying, maybe we should keep our right to keep and bear arms. And I'm seeing other people on the other side once again saying it can never happen, and giving these weapons to civilians, especially Americans, is only going to cause more bloodshed. But I'm curious to see what you have to say. So with that, let's see what the results are. With over 1,100 votes this week, we have yes, I think that this blatant hypocrisy will wake up many, 11%. 50-50. Some will and others will think it can never happen here, 61%. No, hoplophobia is a mental disorder, 26%. And something else, explain in the comments, 3%. Now 50-50 getting the overwhelming votes I think is probably the smart bet. I think we all know people in our personal lives that might be waking up to this. Or maybe if they're not woke to it yet, you can talk to them and explain to them the situation and ask them the critical questions. As a teacher, I have found that asking questions that you already know the answer to is sometimes the best teaching tool that you have. So for example, you want them to be led to the answer through your questions, but because they arrived at it through their own thinking and rationalization, they feel like they figured it out when you guided them to that result all the way. And I think that's really important. So I think if you're talking to someone that might be apathetic or kind of on the fence, you can ask them questions. Hey, what do you think about what's going on in Ukraine, in this story specifically? How do you think that could apply here in the United States? Maybe the Founding Fathers got it right with the Second Amendment, and you might take a fence sitter and bring him over to our side. Now that, of course, is not going to happen to everybody, but I think it's a sure bet that there are a few people that will. So I guess if you're more optimistic, you might vote yes. If you're more pessimistic, you might vote no. But I think a lot of people are just going to vote right down the middle. But I'll tell you what I think. But let's go through each one of these. Yes, I think this blatant hypocrisy will wake up many, 11%. It's not many people that voted for that, but there is the hope. I know that there's a lot of people in the Second Amendment community, people that fight for our rights, not just the Second Amendment, but the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. They have hope for the future. And in many ways, I think with everything going on in this country and the world, it might be waking up a lot of people. I know around here, a lot of people are complaining about the gas prices. Now, this video is not about the gas prices or who the President of the United States is. But people are starting to realize that, energy policy is really important, and you can feel it at the pump. You can feel it at your grocery store because all the groceries you get have to be delivered by 18-wheelers that run on diesel fuel. So the nation's energy policy just can't be a hope and a dream that maybe everything in the future can run on rainbows and unicorns, but actually it runs on oil, and maybe we should have a sound fiscal policy when it comes to our energy that can help us all survive. Well, the same thing can be said for the Second Amendment, because we see the nature of the world and people think everybody is waking up. Well, that's the hope, and I know a lot of optimists would have voted for this. Then we have 50-50. Some will and others will think it can never happen here. The overwhelming vote, 61%. And as I said, I kind of expected this one to win, so we might have some people come to our side. And even if this is the case, it means we've actually converted some people to the Second Amendment. People that were already anti-gun still are anti-gun. Then we have no. Hoplophobia is a mental disorder, 26%. If I was voting in this poll, which by the way, I never do because I never want to skew the results, this is actually the one that I would have voted for. When it comes to debating people that are on the other side of the political spectrum, when it comes to our firearms rights, I have come to the realization that there is an irrational fear of guns. And there's sometimes no way around it. Yeah, I've seen some people get converted. Maybe they go to the range and they shoot a gun and go, oh, this is actually a lot of fun and it's not as dangerous and the guns just don't walk off and kill people like I thought they did. But for the most people, absent of that experience, they're just scared of guns, period. And to be very honest with you, I find that to be very sad, because they have no experience and they can see other people that own guns. They know people that own guns. They can go online, see people shoot guns safely and responsibly. They see firearm stores all across America and there's no results. Everything that they think that is bad happening is not actually happening. They're just getting the news from the media and the anti-gun politicians. But they have no hands-on experience with firearms. They just fear them. They think just being around a gun means that it is death and destruction, and that evil people will only want guns because they are weapons to kill others. Honestly, it's very sad. It really does sadden me that there's so many people that have this irrational fear. And I think that when it comes to most anti-gun people, even if they're not the big bad politicians, they're just your average neighbors who love and care about their communities, but they're scared of guns, it is an irrational fear. And getting over that irrational fear is the biggest struggle that we have being in the pro-Second Amendment community. And then lastly, we have something else explained in the comments. And when I went through the comments here, it was kind of a mix between positive and negative, and some people even say it's all media driven, which I totally understand. So that's my thoughts on this. Let's see what you guys have to say this week with the top rated comments. And with this week's top rated comment, we have Brian Edgett, who says, too many people have a belief that they will never be in harm's way. It happens to others, so they never get it. And I completely agree. And that just goes to the heart of the problem. It's easy for us to just exist in our little bubble. I know that when I was teaching my son to drive, one of the most important lessons that I could teach him, which was taught to me by my dad, is when you're driving, you don't just drive looking at the car ahead of you. You have to look 3, 4, 5, 6 cars ahead of you, or as far down the road as you possibly can see. If you only drive those 25 feet in front of you, well, you're going to have an accident because something is going to creep up on you. Something's going to happen down the road you don't see, and you're going to impact it really fast, and your reaction time isn't going to be quick enough. And I think from a political standpoint, this applies to this issue and the Second Amendment. We can give away our guns. It's never going to happen here. But if it is, we'll have plenty of time to think about it and change. And then all of a sudden, at the drop of a hat, the country's invaded or world politics change, and you're caught with your pants down. Then we have JKing8408, who says, all this makes me want to stock up on more ammo and add more guns to my collection. Well, I feel that way all the time about even the smallest national news. And I know that many people that probably watch this channel feel exactly the same way. Then we have Military Police 75, who says, most of them are trained in the weeks before as a precaution. The government was training them, so they do have some sort of training. Well, this is information I haven't heard, but who knows? Maybe this is the case. But let me ask you, is a couple of weeks of training really the same as having a grown culture around guns where people are using guns responsibly, owning guns responsibly for a lifetime? Isn't that a little bit better than just a couple of weeks of training and going, well, here's how the gun works. Don't point it at anything you don't want to destroy. Here you go out and die for your country. I don't really think the two are equated, but if this is the case, I guess that's better than nothing. Then we have JaredDog3, who says, I think the anti-gun people will say things like, that could never happen in America, or some such thing to justify their position change. And I agree. They're probably looking, going, woohoo, go Ukrainians, here, take your weapons. And here in the United States, like, no, because we control the narrative here. For the most part, we're in control of this nation. We don't want those civilians being armed. So even if we were invaded, we would rather the civilians die because we don't want to lose our power. I truly believe that the people at the top parts of our government that are truly anti-gun and work very hard at anti-gun policies truly are evil, because they know an armed citizenry stands in their way of absolute power. And then finally we have Andrew Tung, who says, I am in the industry, and for the last 2 years guns have been flying off the shelf. Backstock at the manufacturing and wholesalers are almost gone, and the raw materials are in very short supply. The background check today alone were 2.5-hour wait. I have sold to pro-gun people and anti-gun people alike. I have never seen such a change in people. They are scared and arming themselves. Well, this is actually great news from someone that's working in the industry, someone that's obviously in firearm sales, saying that he's selling to anti-gun people. Well, that sounds like some people are changing their mind. So maybe the choice of being 50-50, or saying that a lot of people are going to be woken up by this, maybe that's the way this is going to go, and I'm completely wrong as the pessimist. Well, only time will tell. It's really hard to tell the future with these little snapshots, but we'll have to see where we're at in 5 to 10 years, and hopefully the Second Amendment will be in a better place. But right now, it's really hard to tell what's going on. As I said, there is the fog of war, and it's hard to tell what is propaganda, and there's propaganda on both sides. So I personally think it's better if we don't have a horse in this race to kind of step back, let things play out, and see the results. Because as the saying goes, learn from mistakes. Preferably the mistakes of others. And if we can learn from the mistakes of other nations like Ukraine, who don't have a Second Amendment, well, it's only going to better our nation more. And that's the stance that I like to take, and being a non-interventionist. That's just my personal political philosophy as a libertarian. I really hope that the right people in this conflict are victorious, but that is yet to be seen. Who that is and what's really going on. But if this story is true, I think it bodes well for us using this as support for the Second Amendment and letting everybody know and showing them that even in the 21st century, these types of things can happen. Well, there you go. That is the Texas Gun Vault poll question of the week. I absolutely love making these segments. I love getting the interaction from you guys, seeing what you have to say on today's current events. And it really helps me focus my belief that the Second Amendment is the true and honest way, that we must support it forever for our posterity, to make sure that it is safe for our children, our grandchildren, and even our great-grandchildren, and that things like this that are happening in Ukraine can never happen to us. Well, if you want to participate in next week's poll, please go to the community tab of my YouTube channel. I will post a link in the description as well. Go over there and vote, comment, and like other people's comments so we can get the top-rated comments of the week. I love hearing what you guys have to say and absolutely love making these segments. So let me know if you have any questions in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.